So, we are starting session 4 with one of the most fascinating animals on Earth, the raccoons, of course, and I'm prepared. I don't know if you are prepared. Now we are welcoming Dr. Berit Michler, also with her husband, Dr. Frank-Uwe Michler, one of the few, or two of the few, raccoon experts in Germany. Berit works as a wildlife biologist at the Thünen Institute of Forest Ecosystems in the field of forest biodiversity. She has been researching raccoons for over 10 years, focusing primarily on the feeding ecology and ecological impact of the newcomer. She advises citizens on wildlife issues and advocates an evidence-based management for this fascinating species. So, let's talk about raccoons.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction and, of course, for the possibility to be able to talk about our long-time field research and our consulting experience, and especially because it's not about conservation, as you just heard. It's about the raccoon and about raccoon management of this controversial newcomer. I've divided the talk as followed. First, I'd like to say just a few words about circumstances of raccoon settlement and the current situation in Germany. And thereafter, I'd like to present you the potential fields of influence or impact, namely ecological and economic effects and health relevance. And therefore, I'd just like to tell you something about applied research, about 2 research studies which lead me to some management options for the newcomer. Just a very quick reminder, raccoons are predatory, are carnivores. They're nocturnal and are the most omnivorous, one of the most omnivorous mammals we have worldwide. And the raccoon, or the species raccoon exists in three different species, the crab-eating raccoon, the Cozumel raccoon, but only the North American raccoon was brought to Europe and Asia. And it was brought here, sorry for the graphs, you don't see anything, but I think you can recognize the world. In red you can see the autochthonous distribution area, the North American, that's better. And highlighted in blue, you can see the regions where raccoons were brought during the last centuries due to fur fashion, as you can see here. So people thought it's a good idea to bring them or to enrich our fauna and to bring them and hunt them. As you can imagine, it was not such a good idea. And the latest introduction took place in Japan in 1962. That was not due to fur fashion, the people just wanted to keep them as pets. But that was also not such a good idea, as you can imagine. Here you can see the current distribution in Germany, based on hunting back data from administrative districts. There were 2 initial settlements. I'm not sure which one it is. Is it? One here in the central part of Germany and one in the northeastern part. This was a release of 2 pairs of raccoons, and here in 1955 you can see an old fur farm, and the individuals were just released after the Second World War. And we have nearly every part of Germany is settled by raccoons right now, but we still have the focal points around those 2 initial settlements. And as I just told one colleague yesterday, we have a very conservative expansion of raccoons that lasts very, very long until they spread, because the males, they leave their maternal area after approximately 1 year, but the females, they stay, and they just move very, very, it takes a long time until raccoons expand. So that's why it kind of looks like this. And we have this high population rates around those spots, and it is slowly expanding through Germany and now the Netherlands and all the other countries. So as I just said, raccoons spread extremely successful in Germany. and yeah, even called a paramount example for a successful establishment. And yeah, that's why they were also classified as a native species just before the Nature Conservation Act was modified in 2017. So before that, they were called a native species in Germany. And as I was listening to the talk from John Taylor yesterday, I was thinking about this is the time when people ask me why we do research raccoon. Is just because they're so brilliant. I mean, they kind of conquered Germany, and they're really fascinating. So that's maybe the reason, yeah, why we did all this research. But due to this vast increase of raccoon numbers during the last years, yeah, highly emotional and controversial discussion arose regarding the impacts of this newcomer. No, I'm too tall. Yeah, and about the spreading, and that's why he is classified as an invasive species in Germany, and is also part of the first union list of EU species from 2016. What a lot of people do not know is that Germany has rejected this EU list because the measurements were not sufficient for Germany. We just had one assessment from Great Britain with a moderate risk for raccoons, but that was kind of enough because you can only vote for or against the whole list. So in the end, yeah, most of the countries voted for the EU list, so we have it now on there. Yeah, after the listing of the raccoon, there were some guidelines published for the management of raccoons in Germany, and also some, yeah, as you maybe know, some restrictions for zoos for keeping of raccoons. There's some stuff going on, but it's still a great disagreement about how to manage this species, and this is not at least due to the lack of knowledge about the real impact of this species. Yeah, now I wanted to show you the three potential impact fields, the ecological, economic, and health relevance impact of the raccoons. And for this, I'd like to tell you a bit about our long-term research project in the northeastern part of Germany. The aim was, or the overall aim was, to collect basic ecological data under the aspect of nature and species conservation. That was the longest study that was undertaken in Europe to characterize this new species. It's the Müritz National Park in this northeastern part of Germany, and it's an optimal habitat in Central Europe. As you can see, there are a lot of lakes and old trees, what raccoons like, so the optimal resources for raccoon settlement. And this is also evident by the highest densities ever measured for raccoons in Europe for a natural habitat, namely 4 to 6 individuals per square kilometer. And one part of this national park is also a UNESCO World Heritage Area, and one of the regions with the highest biological diversity in Germany. So as you can imagine, people thought there are so many special, endangered, and protected species. What's happening when the raccoon is conquering the Müritz National Park? That's what we wanted to find out, of course. So a lot of prey species that are potential, a lot of endangered and special species that are on the kind of prey list of the raccoon. Maybe some of you have seen it on the poster yesterday as well. Just a really quick view on the databases during this study. There was nearly over 10 years. We captured almost 500, had almost 500 raccoon captures and 145 different individuals, from which we fitted 70 ones with radio collars. They were not GPS collars, so we had to run after them the whole time, which lead to more than 30,000 localizations and over 18,000 pictures from camera traps. So we had a quite good databases, and we did a lot of research. In total, I think it was 16 sub-projects together with other universities and a lot of partners and master students. So it was a really good overview over the ecology of raccoons, with the spatial use as the basis for all the other issues. And but now, like, due to this ecological fact, I just wanted to show you some results from the ecological effects. Therefore, we collected scat from the latrines, in total over 1,000 fecal samples, and and analyzed them with regard to the food spectrum. And the most important thing is that we did not only a qualification of the predation or of the nutrition, but also a quantification. So what all the other studies did not do is relate the amount of prey we have what the raccoons ate to the to relate supply and demand. So only prey rates are not sufficient to tell anything about the real effect this predation has in a region. So this was the first approach to estimate prey rates in order to assess the local impact of the predators. So as I just said, it's not enough. So only prey rates do not tell us about what effect this has on the prey population in a certain region. So we need prerequisites for the statement of the relevance of preservation. And first of all, we need the population density and the structure of the population. We need a good monitoring in the field of the prey categories, and at least the biomass proportions of those individual prey species. And due to a very good monitoring of vertebrates in the Müritz National Park, and due to our long-term field research, this approach could be done for the first time in the study. And after intensive years of this field research, we could tell that there was no correlation observed between raccoon occurrence and a negative influence of predation. And this was evident by low predation rates on vertebrates, and also by there were almost no endangered species that were eaten or preyed on by the raccoons in that region. We had the highest, very high raccoon densities, and no evidence that species were declining or even disappearing during that period of time. There were even positive population trends of some prey species. So this is, of course, just a regional perspective. So what I want to emphasize is that we really need long-term nutritional analysis to really be able to say something about the local impact of predators, what is not very common nowadays, because people just do this prey rates and say, the animals are preying on something and so they have an impact, but this is not enough to tell about this. Some management option, as I just said, there's no evidence to date of a really lasting negative impact on individual species, because the raccoons are omnivorous and do not prey on just one single prey category, so they are really adaptable. And these threatening population rates can only have really highly specialized species. And up to now, species diversities in area with a low raccoon presence are not lower than in areas where the raccoon has been present for decades. But as I also just mentioned, there are, of course, high regional differences, and there may be, of course, influence of predation in some areas. And there we have the choice between a local population control, which might be, of course, hunting, but also fencing and other management options, because it's not, it's not possible anymore to eliminate the raccoon on a high level. And the other way is also to just accept a new species, because as I also mentioned, it was formerly a native species, and just because the law was changed, yeah, it was just something to think about. It might be also an opportunity to just, yeah, accept that it is there. Yeah, just now, let's come to another area of conflict. Yeah, raccoons tend to urbanization because they have those great abilities of climbing and using their fingers. Yeah, that's why we have a lot of trouble with humans meeting raccoons in their towns suddenly, what they didn't have before. And for this, there were also two studies in Bad Karlshafen and Kassel, and the aim was to develop a conflict management plan for residents. And yeah, I want to show you just some results. Before we look at this, it's important to have a look at the population density in natural landscapes and in urban areas. Yeah, here you can see like the population density in maybe a forest, and here in urban areas. And the reason is quite simple. Yeah, I said raccoons are brilliant, and they are really yeah, managing to forage in the cities because this great human food supply attracts wild animals. And they can use it better than any other animal. Yeah, they can climb, they can manipulate, and they would be quite silly if they wouldn't come to the cities and use all that resources we preserve them, or we give them on a kind of service tablet. Yeah, while they spend hours or nights looking for food in the natural landscapes, they only have to run through a few gardens to be fed up in urban areas. So for them, it's really a good thing that we are there and that we kind of feed them. And this leads, of course, to some damages and some problems with humans. We have damages to gardens, like broken flower pots, or they dig the grass, and of course they harvest our fruits. Often one night before we want to eat it, because they have a really good sense for the fruits. They love plums and cherries, and yeah, so they come and yeah, share it with us. And it even gets more kind of dramatic or more costful when they enter the buildings. Usually they change their sleeping places every night, the raccoons, but not in the cities when they have a really suitable place to sleep, and when they raise their young. Then they spend several weeks at one place, and yeah, you can imagine how this attic looks like after a few baby raccoons have played there for several weeks. So this is the problem in the city, where the economic impact can be quite hard for individuals or for single persons. And we also have the health relevance. Yeah, the good news is that Central European raccoons have only very few diseases and parasites in contrast to their native area. We have only one single zoonosis, the raccoon roundworm, but yeah, it's a very low risk if you just take the normal hygienic. Yeah, if you wash your hands and you do not touch the wild animals, then there's a very low risk of infection. I don't know if you can read this. We just have, since we have raccoons in Germany, we just have 3 documented infections, and you all know that we have thousands of cat and dog roundworm infections every year, so the risk is really low. And here to the management options, it has shown that the best solution is prevention as it comes to problems with raccoons in urban areas, and it is really important, yeah, to educate the people, So wild animals in the city are kind of normal. They're coming due to their perfect living conditions. They do not come because there's no food in the forest, but because they want to share the food we kind of give them. So the best thing to get rid of wild animals is to avoid feeding. And this is not only the direct feeding, as you can see on the left picture, but it's also the indirect feeding through cat food and the leftovers in your gardens and the fruit trees. So often you just have to look through raccoon eyes in your garden to know what they want to have. And avoid direct contact, of course, due to the potential disease transmission, and to take basic hygiene measures. And the second good management option is the habitat management. So if the garden is not nice, then not just you don't want to go there, but also the wild animals, so they just don't come anymore if there's nothing to get. So we have to take care of the garbage and the compost leftovers, so no access to all this stuff, and also to use protective devices to prevent house entrances. So to sum up those management options, raccoons really have successfully established in Germany, but so far there's no evidence of a long-lasting negative impact on other species. But we have those really strong regional influences, and there we need a situation-specific management. And here it is also really important to have a look at the predator. It's often more than one predator, not only raccoons, but if you have a natural reserve area, for example, this really attracts predators. So you have to make sure that you have all the predators in mind that live there. But there are also good methods that can be applied. And due to the economic impacts, so far raccoons have only caused minor damage so far. If there's damage, then it's this individual damage that your house is kind of taken by raccoons, and this can be avoided by those prevention methods I just showed you. And so this human-wildlife conflict can be reduced really effectively and sustainably. They come, but they can. So it's a good opportunity to live with them. And the last one, due to the health relevance, if you adapt to the behavior, there's currently no danger from raccoons. I think this is good news, because this is what we are always asked if there's a threat, and so that's what I wanted to show you for these three impact areas: the ecological, economic, and health relevance impact. And that's it already. I want to thank you for your attention. And if there are any, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. Do we have any questions left here? Okay, wow. Who wants first?
Is there any reason why they don't carry trichinella? Do you know that?
And a reason, because they don't, not really, but like all the investigations have shown that they don't. So, and I mean, they don't eat a lot of meat, and not at all, like they just eat some mice or a bird. They don't eat carcasses. So I guess that's why.
Because like badgers do as well, and because badgers do, and I don't know the real difference. There's obviously a difference, but okay, just interested.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, no.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. Do you have any recommendations? I'm a vet, and there's a big discussion around vets if they at all treat raccoons that are found by people, especially cubs, because due to this UN list, you are not allowed to release them, and the places who keep them are full, most of them.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you take them into the clinic, you can't release them or bring them anywhere, and that's a big problem. Why most of the clinics I know don't, so they refuse to take them in at all, and that's an ethical problem, I guess.
Yeah,
because
it
if
absolutely
we have
is.
healthy cubs, we are not allowed to put them down.
Yeah, but that's a hard question. So we get a lot of calls that that babies are found or cubs are found, and usually you have to tell them that they should leave them in the nature, because often the mother leaves them alone already when they're quite little, and there's a good chance that she will come back and takes them. But if they're injured, it's some people, they bring it to the doctor and they find a doctor who treats it. But I know it's a big problem. So, and I don't really have a recommendation, because that's also the thing with this with the federal act. So they're not native anymore, but they were before. So now the treatment has changed, but nobody kind of knows about it. Some people just do it unless. So they find a vet and then release it. But I'm also not sure if this is very good for the animals, because if you just release them somewhere, they won't get along there, because they also have a social system, and but I can't really give a good advice what you should do with the cubs.
It's difficult, I guess.
I mean, there are a few stations who still take care of raccoons, and there are also some very motivated people in Germany who take care about those ones, and there we can just tell them the number and say maybe they can help.
Okay, thank you.
It was a total difference how the behavior of the Dutchmen against raccoons than in Germany. But we had this morning, during the breakfast, we had a small talk. And I was really, really surprised that 1.5 million raccoons live in Germany.
Yeah, that's what it's hard to determine the number. I mean, we have investigated them for 10 years in a region, and after that we could tell how much there live. So it's just an estimation, like some people did. Of course, it's always a regional thing, but we have a lot of raccoons in Germany.
Is it allowed to keep them as a pet?
It depends. So not really. After the new EU regulation, you have to have really there are what you call. You have to have really special, or the vets come and control how you keep them. So you can kind of keep them, but it's not really very easy. So you have to have a permission and several management issues you have to follow for keeping them. So, but you can keep them.
It's allowed.
It's allowed with several special permissions.
And they by hunters they're killing a lot every year.
Yeah, almost 200,000 or around 200,000 a year.
Yeah, in Holland we have the idea to catch them in a trap and bring them to a zoo, and then they escape from the zoo again.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I just heard about it.
It's not a good... okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Quick question?
Yeah.
Do it.
Just a comment, really, rather than a question, but there are two worlds here. That's a really interesting presentation, and there's a world in which we are wrestling with this, and the law has changed, and people are struggling about what to do with it, and blah, 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 blah. There's another world in which we're supposed to be nature positive by 2030. We're supposed to be rewilding. We're supposed to be protecting 30% of our land surface in the next few years, and we're encouraging people in other parts of the world to try and coexist with very large and dangerous animals. We need to get some consistency and some integrity between these two worlds, because at the moment we're talking one thing and doing another. It's exactly the same in the UK with beavers. People are terrified of them.
Yeah.
Good. Then a big applause again for this beautiful presentation. Okay. Guess we could start with the next presentation by Michou Weimar from the Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. Michou holds a master's degree in animal science and bioinformatics and worked also at the Rotterdam Zoo. And now she's a member of the Future for Nature Academy and helped with the organization and was recently part of the National Selection Committee. Now she is presenting parts of her thesis about hyenas, the wild, the domestic, and the stealthy, mapping seasonal livestock depredation by spotted hyenas. There you go.
I'm smaller. Yeah, so like you said, my name is Michou, and I'm excited to tell you a bit more about depredation by hyenas. So I will first introduce the concept of human-wildlife conflict a bit. We've gone over it a few times during the last few presentations and yesterday as well. And then I will explain a bit what I exactly did, and then dive into the results of livestock depredation by hyenas, spotted hyenas, and finally discuss what this means, this conflict means for conservation. So human-wildlife conflict remains a major unresolved challenge in conservation, and as we also revealed during the last few days, the last 2 days, it works both ways. So it's also defined as a adverse effect of wildlife on humans or the other way around. And I mean this just entails so many things of the things we already discussed, so yeah. And these adverse effects can reveal themselves as global range collapses in carnivore species, monetary losses, and also losses of human life and livestock. And yeah, that's especially what I want to focus on. So livestock depredation is driven by these anthropogenic and environmental variables that are non-uniform across the landscape, which also make that this livestock depredation is non-uniform across the landscape. So, for example, in areas with higher rainfall and denser vegetation, there's increased depredation. And we also know that the frequency of depredation varies per season. And some areas note more depredation in the wet season and others in the dry season, really depending on the overlap of animals. But it's unknown if the spatial distribution also varies between seasons. So, and we know that the patterns of depredation are determined by the spatial distribution of carnivores depredating on this livestock. So, and of course this is also non-uniform and varies per season. And it's also restricted to areas of co-occurrence with humans and livestock, because when there's no humans and livestock, there can be no livestock depredation by hyenas. So this is especially important in mixed-use landscapes. These are areas where there's no national protection, but it is inhabited by pastoralists moving along the area throughout the seasons. And also in these areas, we know that denning carnivores are present quite near these human settlements. And we know that these denning carnivores, especially like African wild dogs, we know that they tend to kill their natural prey at an intermediate distance. So they don't want to kill their prey too close to the den to avoid attracting scavengers, but also not too far away, because they don't want to abandon their offspring for too long. So my aim was to map this seasonal depredation, livestock depredation by spotted hyenas, in a mixed-use landscape. Because spotted hyenas caused by far the most livestock depredation throughout East Africa, ranging from 53% to 89%, which is a large range, but it's always the majority. And also, most of them reside outside of naturally protected areas, for example, in these mixed-use landscapes. So it's important to identify where the conflict hotspots are, because if they depredate on livestock and you find back your sheep or your goats like this, then people tend to retaliate. So if you know where they are most likely to prey on livestock, then you know where possibly these conflict hotspots occur as well. So my objectives were threefold. First, I wanted to look into the drivers, then map the seasonal probability, and then identify where the conflict hotspots were. This research was all conducted in Okirimatian and Shompole. It's located in the South Rift Valley of Kenya, and it's a place of seasonal land use. So colors are a bit, I'll just quickly go here. So here you have the permanent human settlements, the bomas in the purple circles, and there's also permanent grazing there. Then a bit more over this area, you have the wet season grazing, and in the dashed lines, that's the community conservancy. So here is a buffer, and there are, yes. So here is the buffer, and that's where the dry season settlements are, and also dry season grazing, whereas the core area is really more of a dry season refuge, where they graze if it's like a very dry season. But of course, this happens more often, and the triangles indicate the true conflict locations that I measured, and you can already see that's also occurring in the conservancy. Just go here. So the rainfall primarily falls in the wet seasons, the rainy seasons, and almost exclusively there. And I included these into my my research. It's inhabited by Maasai pastoralists that live together with their livestock, and they also live together with a large, intact native herbivore community, which in turn serve as a prey base for the spotted hyenas. Well, of course, in addition to also then the livestock, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here. So livestock depredation was collected opportunistically. When a ranger was notified of conflict, they went there and they notified the characteristics of the conflict. It's about a 15-month period, and when they arrive at the scene, it's confirmed by visual identification, tracks, but also injury type, because I'm sorry if you're a visual person, but most carnivores suffocate their prey, whereas hyenas, just get out the intestines and kill the animal in that way. And I will not bore you too much with my methods. I want to keep you awake until lunch, so these are the variables I took into account, and NDVI was a proxy for vegetation density. And the distance to the boma is this location, a human settlement where humans live together with their livestock. And I mapped the probability, the predicted probability of depredation in Maxent. So for my seasonal drivers, I saw that vegetation density positively affected depredation. So there was more depredation, very linear correlation on a log transformation for depredation, which also makes sense because spotted hyenas prefer to live in or near densely vegetated areas, especially if it's close to human activity. So that's according to expectations. And then for the distance to the boma, I expected it to be more positive, negative. I mean, the closer you are to a boma, the more depredation there is, because that's where the livestock is. But it seemed more like a threshold. So after about 4 kilometers, it does indeed decrease. So maybe this area is just quite evenly occupied by livestock in that sense. And then for the distance to the den, I expected this intermediate distance, but I saw kind of the other way around. So most depredation was either very far away or close to the den. And I will dive a bit more into that now. So first, for the distance to the boma, in the wet season this was a driver, and this could just mean that these areas below this threshold are suitable for both natural prey and livestock, so this increases the co-occurrence and these interactions between the animals. And it could also reflect a local livestock distribution, there is more conflict with where there's more livestock. Some studies correct for this when modeling livestock depredation, but I mean, maybe then you find a high predicted probability in an area where there's not that many livestock, or what is not even suitable for livestock, so that might be more area specific depending on your aims and objectives. And in the dry season, it was not a driver. This could also be because there was overall not that much depredation in the dry season, because we know that the natural prey of hyenas in this area, they move into these areas that are very inaccessible to people and their livestock. It's very densely vegetated, and there's probably just less co-occurrence in these areas. And it's because it's densely vegetated, this was a driver of the dry season depredation, so that could also be connected. So it seems like this anthropogenic driver is more important in the wet season. For the distance to the den, I predicted to the highest probability about 9 to 10 kilometers away, but I couldn't assess like the individual effect of each den, because when you move further away than 10 kilometers, you get closer to another den. So yeah, that's just hard to really assess the exact trade-off, so I couldn't confirm that now. And it was also high in close proximity. We know that there's a high activity of spotted hyenas near dens. All members of a clan repeatedly visit the den regardless of like whether they are reproducing or not. So it could be that the encounters close to dens are more a case of chance, just affecting, okay, there's livestock close to the den, then we eat it. But they are, in that sense, maybe not actively hunting the livestock. And then for the dry season, it wasn't a predictor. Overall, hyenas are not regarded as seasonal breeders, but we have the higher birth rates have been observed in either the wet or the dry season, depending on which is accompanied by more resources in the area. And denning females, but overall, like females, they have this long distance central place foraging, and so they keep coming back to this den every time they are going to forage. And probably when they are denning, we know that they have shorter commuting trips and they stay closer to the den. So maybe that's why it doesn't, maybe if there's less denning females in the dry season, or maybe even none at all, then we know that they are like not that restricted to the den in that sense, so it doesn't affect the depredation. And for the spatial distribution, I will just go here again because of the colors. So you can see here, the red means a high chance of this depredation. And in the wet season, this was especially along the edges of my study area. So that was in the wet season grazing areas. And it really follows the pattern of like seasonal grazing, because it moves inside the conservancy, inside these dry season refuges. So these wet season grazing areas are especially seem to be these conflict hotspots where people also may retaliate because of the hyenas killing their livestock. This could be because the prey is more dispersed in the wet season, because the area is more suitable, so the natural prey is more scattered, so it's easier to hunt this livestock that is more packed together. So I suggest to assess the seasonal distribution of carnivores and their prey to see, okay, where are their prey, where's the carnivore, and where is maybe the conflict also occurring. And for conservation, this allows for seasonal risk mapping. So then you can efficiently implement these non-lethal techniques such as predator-proof fencing or livestock guard dogs. Because if you then reduce conflict and reduce these lethal measures, which can even be economically advantageous to focus on these non-lethal techniques, you know, okay, in which season do I need to invest in which area? And in that way you can prevent these global range collapses of carnivores in human-dominated landscapes. So kind of to conclude, for the broader perspective, so there is seasonal variation in the distribution and the drivers. So I suggest to really assess these seasonal species distributions as well in other areas to see where the conflict is most likely to happen. And also, by understanding this spatial temporal variation, you can prioritize these efforts to mitigate conflict and thereby protect species that are prone to wildlife conflict. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michou, for this talk. We have time for one question. Yes. Okay.
Hi, thanks so much for that talk. Really interesting. I have a question about some of the pictures you put at the beginning with just a sea of dead animals, or it looked like that the hyenas had come in and massacred multiples. but they didn't consume all of them. Are they hunting a bit for sport? Is it play for them? Why aren't they actually dragging the carcasses back or fully consuming them?
Well, I guess it's kind of similar to the wolf hunting sheep. Maybe like sheep and goats don't have a very good instinct predator-wise, so they run around, but they cannot also really escape, right? So the hyena is like, okay, I kill as many animals because then if I return, I can keep getting food. So yeah, it seems to be in that sense.
Okay.
Good, thank you. One last applause.
And then I guess we can continue with our next speaker. We are going online again. Now we're traveling to Namibia. And I hope Tim Hofmann is now available.
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would like to introduce you. So now Tim Hofmann is talking now. He's from the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia. Tim holds a master's degree in nature conservation biology, and he is currently pursuing a PhD in wildlife sciences at the University in Göttingen. He is a certified dog trainer with over 10 years of experience working with dogs. And since 2018, he has been leading the scat detection project for the Cheetah Conservation Fund. His work focuses on the intersection of dog training and conservation biology. So, Tim, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Can you guys already see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then let me dive right into it. Thank you so much for giving me time to talk today. I would like to start with a big thank you to the Serengeti-Park, as we are one of the organizations or one of the projects that's supported by you guys. So I would like to explain a bit about the Cheetah Conservation Fund, our dog project, and sort of give a little bit of an insight into one of the research we are trying to do. So the Cheetah Conservation Fund is a Namibian-based organization working to ensure the cheetah are surviving in the wild, and we've been doing that for the past 30 years. And our work is based on 3 pillars, which is conservation, research, and education. And I think the detection dogs actually fit into all of these 3 categories quite well. As we just heard before, we actually have 2 dog programs at CCF, and the Livestock Guardian dogs here were already mentioned before. So here we are teaming up dogs with a flock of livestock, exactly like described, to reduce potential human-wildlife conflicts, so predators attacking livestock and thus retaliant killing. But I actually want to talk about the other dog project we are running here, which is those guys here, the wildlife detection dogs. And this is the program I'm working with and that I'm doing my PhD about. So to give a very brief introduction, why are we looking for scat? Well, it holds a lot of information. We can learn about the donor species. We can learn what the animal has been feeding on to evaluate human-wildlife conflict. We can learn about their genetics. And me as an ecologist, I can understand where they move, which habitats they use, etc. So there's a good reason for us to find scat, but it's super, super difficult. And that's why we're using the dogs. So the dogs, they find more than humans do. They obviously don't need to see it. They will use their nose, so they are less distracted by dense habitat and by things that are disguising the picture of the scat, and they are especially more accurate in identifying it. So in the area where I work here in Namibia, we have a whole bunch of carnivores that are somewhat similar in size and somewhat similar in diet, and thus their scat also looks somewhat similar. And I honestly do mistakes all the time, whereas my dogs, they are pretty accurate. And they are faster than us, simply moving faster. So more, better, and in a larger area. And because of that, they are becoming increasingly popular in research. A lot of people are using these dogs nowadays over different continents and biomes for a whole bunch of target species. And what I want to add from a personal point of view, they're also super charismatic. Literally everyone loves dogs, doesn't matter where you go. And for us working with human-wildlife conflict, these dogs are a great door opener for conversations about these species and about the problems by showing what they do and by explaining their work. So why are we doing that for cheetahs? Well, cheetah population has been declining drastically over the past decades. Additionally to that, they are extremely wide-ranging species and they occur in low numbers. So finding their scat is extremely difficult. and this makes them extremely difficult to monitor. So even with the dogs, we're putting in a lot of effort to find their scat. And in order to do that, we need to go through a few training stages. And we start by imprinting. Imprinting is basically making the dog understand what we are looking for. We are doing this with these scent boxes here. There's a target scent hidden in it, in my case, Cheetah scat, and the dog would walk up and down that line, indicating the scat. And the second one, and I thought it's quite neatly fitting to the zoo bubble that you were all talking about, because we're actually doing that as well. So we have cheetahs resident on site here at CCF. They are all victims of some kind of human-wildlife conflict and therefore reside with us. We have some candidates that we can release, but they are kept in different enclosures, not the ones I'm referring to now. And these cats are being locked into smaller feeding camps when they receive their meals, which means the larger enclosures are open and I can go in there with my dogs and we have scat that I know is from the target species, that hasn't been manipulated by a human. There's no human sensory leading up to it, and we can train there. And the next step, and this is sort of the most important one, is going into the field, making the dog understand we have to search very long distances, keep going, maybe find a lot of things that we're not looking for, but at some point you will get your reward, you will find what we are looking for. And this is where I want to talk a bit more about. So one part of my PhD is evaluating the dog's work. And there are different parameters that we are looking at, which we can say, how many do they find out of how many are there? How accurate are they in identifying it? There's a whole bunch, but for this talk, I want to focus on just one, and that is the effective detection range. So I want to know if I walk with my dog on a road, how far to the left and right of myself, basically, do I find scats? And we can describe that by something called the effective sweep width. So the effective sweep width comes from search and rescue, and it defines the area inside the range where the number of missed samples equals the number of found samples outside the range. I'll explain that more in just a second. And to do that, to evaluate this, we did an experiment. Picture this is our road, 2 kilometers in length, and we threw out a whole bunch of positive scats and negative scats from other species that we don't want the dog to find. And we asked our dog to walk this. And we did this over 4 years, again and again and again. So doing so, we reached quite a high number of positive samples, of which the dog detected about half. That doesn't sound good enough, right? We want definitely to find more than half. So it is then quite interesting to look at that effective sweep width, which is here. So these are the two lines that I was talking about, detections and non-detections. So where those meet, we assume that we will still find a lot, and that's at 16 meters. So 32 meters in total. So how does that inform the work that we are doing in the field? Well, this is now a comparison to all the samples we have been collecting throughout 4 years of field work for the same dog, same handler, different sort of similar setups, road searches in different environments. And what we can see is, well, until about sort of 6-7 meters, we see this decreasing, but then it reaches a plateau and that keeps going until the dashed line again, which is the effective sweep width, or half of it, so one side to the road. And what we would have expected is actually that this sort of keeps going, because from statistics, from that effective sweep width value, we know that within that range, it should just be gradually increasing, but it doesn't. So this is quite interesting. And when trying to interpret that, we were thinking, well, either the dog behaved completely different during our assessment than it did in the field, but it's sort of unlikely. I mean, we evaluate our dog, we know the dog's behavior, and I can, as the dog handler, say that I think she was performing quite similar. So the other option would be, well, if cheetahs use roads, which we know they do, but it's somewhat debated because roads are also dangerous. They are the predators, they are increased human activities, so they might do that, but less frequent than other predators. However, if they do, they probably will defecate rather onto or very close to the road, rather than further away in the vegetation. And I think this is quite neat, because it circles back to our training that we now will adjust in order to not ask our dog to search left and right of us and sort of increase the area that we are trying to sample, but rather stay close on the road. This allows us to sample further and potentially accommodate our searches better to these extremely wide-ranging species, such as the cheetah. So I think it's a neat example of how we can go from dog training to research and back to dog training. Yeah, so thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please ask me now or send me an email or check out our websites or the website of the wildlife detection dogs that I'm also affiliated with. Thank you.
Yeah, danke schön. Thank you very much, Tim, to Namibia. Any questions here in the audience or in the chat? Nada? Nothing? Nichts? Oops, Stuhl. One question. Okay, we don't have a question here, so thank you very much, Tim, for your presentation. Have a nice evening, enjoy the rest of the conference, and maybe we see once in a life. Thank you very much.
Same to you guys. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Microphone. Yeah, we are continuing with our next online speaker. Now from Austria. I hope Maximilian Rometsch is now. Okay. Okay, your sharing the screen works. I introduce yourself. You now. Maximilian is interested in zoos, and his interest for animals began at a young age. So after a bachelor's degree in biology at the University of Constance, he studied zoology at the University of Vienna. And for his master thesis, he researched rock hyraxes at Zurich Zoo. In March 2024, he started a trainee position as a curator for education and zoo biology at the Walter Zoo Gossau in Switzerland. The title of his presentation now is called Effects of the Mixed Species Display on the Behavior of the Rock Hyrax Procavia capensis. The screen is yours.
Thanks for the introduction. I hope you can see everything.
Yes.
Perfect. So first of all, I want to thank Cordula Galeffi and Leila Davis from the Zoo Zurich for the help in my master thesis, and my supervisor Angela Stöger from the Austrian Academy of Sciences. And well, the goal of my study was to research how rock hyraxes are affected by interspecies association and how they can benefit from mixed species displays. This was done by doing an observational study at the Zoo Zurich and conducting a mixed species survey at several zoos where I asked them on their experience with hyrax mammal species combinations. Well, I am sure you are all aware of the positive effects of mixed species exhibits on education, since we can represent a whole ecosystem rather than just showcasing one animal species, but also positive effects on welfare and the management of a species. On the other hand, as we have seen yesterday, there are also many negative factors on welfare and management, health risks, aggression, lethal accidents. So it's necessary to research and evaluate current exhibits for the design and planning of future exhibits, which is also facilitated by, for example, the EASA. The focus species of my study is a very social animal. The rock hyrax lives in one male, multi-female groups, have stable social networks. It's also a seemingly lazy animal because it spends most of the day sunbasking, but this is necessary because they have very low thermoregulatory capabilities, and therefore they need to seek shade and warmth to regulate their body temperature, and are therefore dependent on stones and rocks in their habitat for their thermoregulatory abilities. Preferred sites like this Coppier Formation you can see here are also preferred by other species due to the accumulation of resources and anti-predator benefits. And the rock hyraxes therefore have to associate with these other species, which is unfortunately rather unexplored outside of sympatric relationships with related bush hyraxes. In zoos, rock hyraxes are one of the less common species, but they are often kept in mixed species context. The most common combination being with Cape ground squirrel, but also commonly with aardvarks, colobus monkeys, several mongoose species. I researched at the site where 3 species were kept in the mixed species display: rock hyraxes, Nubian ibexes, and gelada baboons at Zurich Zoo. The exhibit is based on the Ethiopian highlands ecoregion and has several features dedicated to all animals on display. We have these small rock sites imitating natural colony sites of rock hyraxes, these mountain walls imitating night quarters of ibexes and geladas, and we have these large gravel sites which are used by the monkeys as enrichment. And of course, backstage quarters evasion options for all animals on display. I use classical instantaneous sampling for getting my data. I did visual observations from the visitor area and observed one focus animal for 25 minutes and then changed the animal. Observations occurred every 30 seconds, and I collected data on behavior, location, and association. I defined associations as 2.5 meters or less distance to a member of another species. And note that I use the term association and not interaction, since spatial proximity not every time results in an interaction between species. I also did some all-occurrence sampling for vocal events. For the ethogram, I used the only available ethogram for hyraxes by Sabine Höft in combination with available research data and, of course, my own pre-observations at Zurich Zoo. Then I divided every behavior into these 10 categories you can see here. The most important being stationary behavior, including sunbasking, since hyraxes need a large portion of the day to regulate their body temperature, but also interesting for my study, agonistic behavior, neutral interactive behavior, being alert, and observance behavior, since these 2 categories incorporate interaction between species and within species. Well, the focus animals were the 3 hyraxes kept at Zurich, but I also did a small comparative analysis with the 3 ibexes in the exhibit to get the understanding of the other interspecies effects. Note that the geladas were only observed indirectly when in association with one of the 2 species. So as you can see here, mostly observation of hyrax is 145 hours and some observation with the Nubian ibex is 25 hours. Coming to the effects on the species, I have this small summary that interspecies associations accounted for about 9% of all observations in the hyraxes, and they most commonly took place in areas with high overall usage, meaning the colony site of the hyraxes and the corridors connected to the colony site. But there are some distinct behavioral categories that seem to be directly affected by interspecies association. This seemingly overwhelming graph shows how the behavioral categories change outside and within association, meaning it shows how it changed when an animal of another species was within 2.5 meters and no animal was within 2.5 meters. And for example, if it's decreased, we have a lower value on this logarithmic scale. This was the fact for highly private behaviors like reproduction, but also metabolism. We have categories that were more or less the same. Stationary behavior was about 70% for both data sets, indicating that a large portion of the associations took place in areas where hyraxes were resident, the colony site, for example, and are caused by chance, passerbys, or other animals that invaded the territory of the hyraxes. Then we have many categories showing an increase, of course, interactive behavior, but also interestingly, comfort behavior and vocal behavior. Attention-grabbing events resulted in behaviors maybe connected to nervousness, like a nervous scratching, empty chewing behavior. Also, interestingly, we have an increase in foraging behavior, which should be noted that this is not connected to food provided by keepers, since most foraging, about 80%, was on natural vegetation independent of the feeding schedule. So in nature, if we have something like that, animals foraging in close proximity or association, we can assume that some factors come into play, like information transfer, predator repulsion benefits, or, for example, shared vigilance. So it would be interesting to further research which effects come into play in the zoo setting here. Also interesting is that the ibexes, despite showing higher association rates, didn't show such trends in their behavioral effects, and the only increasing behavior was aggression. This may be caused by the evolutionary background of the ibexes. Due to the size difference, predator repulsion may play no role and things like that. And also Nubian ibexes are from a very harsh and deserty environment where the costs of cooperation may be much higher than the cost of resource competition may be much higher than the benefit of cooperation. To summarize, most associations seem to arise by chance, but distinct behaviors were directly affected by the interspecies effects. And we have the hyraxes showing very naturalistic behaviors. I talked about the usage of natural vegetation, 80% of all foraging behavior, but also a natural activity and area usage patterns were shown. This may be one of the main benefits, that the spacious and structurally diverse exhibit allows the hyraxes to display highly naturalistic behaviors compared to the often limited structures and limited opportunities given within a standalone small hyrax enclosure. Well, it should be noted that I had a very small sample size. I tried my best to compare everything with prior in situ and ex situ data, which is also limited or in the fact of in situ data based in the 60s and 70s. I also incorporated the survey on the experience with hyrax mammal mixed species exhibits, giving me further input, and therefore I could create this large network of interplay of different factors affecting hyraxes in mixed species displays. So we have benefits on the animal welfare, direct positive benefits via new stimuli, animal interaction, but also the benefits of a spacious and naturalistic exhibit. This makes the exhibit more attractive to guests, which makes them more susceptible for visitor education. We have an environment highly suited for research. Animals are suited to the presence of people, and we have a higher number of interspecies interaction compared to a natural environment, which may help us to predict which factors may occur in the nature if due to human intervenience and other effects, interspecies interaction and species densities at special sites may increase in the future. Also, we have benefits on population management. Rock hyraxes are also a species with the problem of male surplus, and within a mixed species exhibit, we can relatively simply give them high welfare by combining them, for example, with monkey species or mongooses in another exhibit. So thank you for your attention, and I would like to once again thank the team at Zurich and at Vienna, and maybe you have a question. Thanks.
Thank you, Maximilian, for sharing your interesting study with us. Any questions here in the audience? No? Are you okay with no questions, Maximilian? Okay, then thank you again for this nice presentation, and would be nice to welcome you here next year if you want. But, well.
Of course, yes. No, thanks, of course, yes.
Co-op. Good. Now we reached almost the end, and I'm disappointed now and sad. No. The last in-person speaker now, Dr. Malin Berit Held. Just one last presentation before lunch, so be patient again. She's from the University of Veterinary Medicine in Hannover, Germany, so in the Surroundings again. After finishing university in 2019, Malin developed a sedation for American bison with drugs approved in Germany for food-producing animals as part of her doctoral thesis. As part of her work as a practicing vet in a small animal practice, she takes care of the Tierpark Herford and Safariland Stuckenbrook. In addition to several externships at zoos in Germany and abroad, she's doing a voluntary work at the Lilongwe Wildlife Center in Malawi, correctly? Okay, and now I have to excuse myself if I pronounce it wrong. The title of her presentation is The Sedation of American Bison, Bison with butorphanol, azaperone, and detomidine, BAD. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here today and have the opportunity to present some results of my doctoral thesis. To be honest, I feel a little bit off topic because we've heard so much about great conservation projects and animal welfare research, and now I jump in with a rather medical talk. But I think it's a good example on how we can use veterinary medicine research to improve animal welfare and also to transfer from livestock animals, or in this case non-domesticated but kept for meat production, and transfer to wild animals like the European bison. You will see that later. Yeah, the problem in Germany is that the American bison is a food-producing animal. So there are a lot of regulations. They have to get ear tags, at least with 9-month-old, and they have to be tested annually for bovine herpes virus, so you have to get blood samples from them. And the common procedure is to do it in a chute or under general anesthesia, but the problem with that is that the common antidotes are not allowed to use on food-producing animals here. So you can't antagonize the anesthesia. Yeah, that's why the idea was to find a sedation that allows us to get to the animal to get some blood samples or placing the ear tags, and that comes out without an antagonization, and they're going to wake up quickly enough so they won't be at risk. And there's some literature about standing sedation on European bison with butorphanol and detomidine. There was a paper in 2017. And yeah, Michler tried the same drugs at the Northern Zoo on 2 American bisons in 2018. That's why we decided to use butorphanol and detomidine, and we added azaperone, because there's a really similar combination of drugs used in the US with midetomidine, butorphanol, and azaperone. Yeah, and then I did some pre-tests to actually find a dosage. We first thought about doing standing sedation, but because I worked inside the herd, we quickly discarded that idea, because we could not find a point where the animal kept standing but won't run away with the other animals of the herd. So we went for recumbency, and we wanted a short tolerance phase to be able to perform our procedures, but a rapid recovery so that they can stand up quickly after the procedure, because one problem in bison is that depending on the social structure in the herd, they either are really protective about the animal laying down and they try to make it stand up, or they will try to get advantage of it and maybe hurt it. So we want to minimize that risk, of course. And yeah, here you can see the dosage I went for that went best in the pre-tests. And then I evaluated this dosage on 30 animals in 4 different herds. 3 of them actually had shoots, but tried this sedation as an alternative. And yeah, we used a dart gun for distance injection. And after the animals laid down, we approached and I took the blood samples from the coccygeal vein, and in a few cases when they laid on the side, I went for the jugular vein as well. And in the other cases, we placed ear tags. There was a lot on calves. We sometimes put, you can see it, the picture is really bad, but you can see we sometimes put a little cage around it to be protected from the mother, because we didn't want to sedate the mother as well. And yeah, after that I took some physiological data and observed the probants until they got up and showed directed locomotion again. I evaluated the state of arousal at point of injection, and after that when approaching to them and handling them, the degree of sedation, the muscle relaxation, and the reaction to the needle insertion or the ear tag placement to say something about the analgesic effect. And for the physiological parameters, I measured heart rate, respiratory rate, and body temperature. I tried to use pulse oximetry, but it didn't really work. I couldn't get any reliable parameters because it's recommended to use the prepuce or the vulva, and the first animals we did were all males, so I would have to go for the prepuce, and it was too dangerous. The sedation wasn't that deep, and they sometimes kept standing up, laid down again, and then you don't want to go between the legs. Yeah, and I documented salivation and urination because these are common side effects of the used drugs. So in 26 of the 30 test subjects, we were successful, meaning they laid down and we were able to approach and manipulate them and performing our procedure. For the analgesia, only one animal stood up before we could end the procedure, so it was rated at not sufficient, but the other ones were good to minimal reaction. And what I have to add is that 70% got into a lateral position during the tolerance phase for some time. We didn't really want that because in ruminants it's not good if they lay on the wrong side, they're gonna be blotted. But it was, as I said, they sometimes stood up again or they got into sternal recumbency again and then laid down on the side for some minutes, so it wasn't that they laid down for a really long time on one side. So I don't want to bore you too much with these numbers, but we saw a first effect after about 7 minutes, and I would recommend to not go towards the animal before 25 minutes because we noticed if we approached earlier that they going to be distracted and stand up more often, so it was harder to get to them. Yeah, and then in total, they tolerated manipulation for about 5 minutes, but not all of them 5 minutes in a row. Sometimes they tolerated for 1 minute and then stood up and laid down again, and we could do another 2 minutes of checkup on them. And yeah, after about 52 minutes, they stood up again and didn't lay down again. So this was defined as the end of the tolerance phase. Yeah. So for the physiological data, there was a bit of a problem as there's very few literature on the physiological respiratory rate or heart rate on bison. I think a problem there is that if it's measured, it's always measured on sedated bison. But I think I would say we had a little bradycardia here. Yeah, there it is. So, and we've seen hypersalivation and diuresis. As I said, it's common for the used drugs. The weights, of course, we had to estimate them because we couldn't put the bison on a scale. So I would say for the really young animals, we might have overestimated the weight a bit because if you look at literature in general, you say younger animals need a bit of a higher dosage than the adult ones. And in this case, it went really well with the same dosage, but it might be because we overestimated the really wrong ones. We had, unfortunately, one case where an animal died on the next day after the sedation. It was the oldest animal I had in the study. It was about 20 years old, and it might be ill before because it had some signs of diarrhea. And we overestimated the weight there as well because it was in winter, the fuel was really thick, and when we actually approached to it and touched it, we said, okay, it's thinner than we thought from the distance. So it actually got a higher dosage than the recommended one. This resulted in a really long time of recumbency, so it laid down for about 2 hours. After that, it stood up, and it behaved normal in the herd for that evening. But on the next day, what was found dead by the owner. But it was the only case with a bad outcome. So with the pre-tests and some animals I had to exclude from the study, I did over 45 sedations, I guess. And this was the only one with a really negative outcome. So yeah, however, I would say it's a safe sedation for young animals as well as for adults. It's good for small interventions, for short period, and for minor painful procedures. They stand up after less than 60 minutes, so it's not too much time you need to plan for that. And from what the owners told me, they found it to be really quicker and less stressful than going with this full hair through a chute. We didn't measure like cortisol levels or something like that. It would be interesting to know if it's actually less stressful for the animals, because for the owners, from what they told me, it was. And yeah, I come back to the point that it might be a good alternative to improve animal welfare, even if we had a functional procedure before, but this might be better. And we have to consider to transfer to the European bison. We talked about that yesterday for a short chat, and maybe to other animals as well, because there's literature about this sedation on, I guess, rhino and elephant. So there's a big potential, I think, from this combination. Yeah, and then I'm finished. I'm happy to answer your question.
Cool. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Do we have any bison-related questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you for that talk. I was curious about the method of estimating the weight of the bison, because like you said, there are some issues with the long fur, the winter coat. Yeah. So how do you go about doing that?
So I always did it together with the owners. They had some knowledge about it because all the herds I worked with were kept for meat production. So they knew the weight of the carcasses from the different ages. And we used that to estimate, and I did some research before on, there's some literature on wild bison, on how the weight develops in correlation to age and, mainly to the age and to the size, but you have to estimate that as well. So
right.
That was the 2 points I used. Yeah.
So you're looking at the relative size
of
the individuals too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. Is it a big business in Germany, bisons?
Not that big. It's no. It's kind of it's a small edge. So I think we have about, I don't know, I don't remember the number, but we have about maybe 20 keepers, owners who own bison privately for meat production. And yeah, it's a problem because it's not really much research done on them, and we have this regulation that are actually set up for cows and pigs, and they have to adapt to it as well. So, yeah.
And one last question from Dr. Böhr.
I just want to comment on Marius' question. We did this study because we feel that the bison economy is slowly growing, especially because this animal is very useful for extensive keeping. You do not need any shelter for them because you can keep them by -40 till +40 degrees. So it's a very, very resistant animal concerning big ambient temperature variations. And well, the bison is very much capable of defending its young. So when the wolves come, they don't have so many chances to get some of these young calves. So it's probably a good species for the future and keeping on large landscapes without any fences or without just fencing the bison and not the other animals and letting the wolves run where they want.
Yeah. I guess this was the last question. Then a big last applause again. And thanks for ending the session. Also for the online people. Oh, the session is now over. We are having lunch break now, again here in front of our conference room, until 1:50. So everyone be back in 1 hour. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you've had a nice lunch break. And now I want to introduce you to you Yvonne Pohlner, our next speaker. As we've already heard yesterday, she specialized on gorillas. She's a primate conservationist with more than 15 years expertise and is engaging a lot in public education via zoos and museums to help protect wildlife and their habitats. And now she will tell us more about her doctoral research she's doing at the University of Stirling, Scotland, about gorillas and their personality and well-being. Yeah, please welcome Yvonne Pohlner.
Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today, and thanks you all for attending. And thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm a PhD student at Stirling University, supervised by Hannah Buchanan-Smith and Dr. Claire Andrews. And I had a wonderful collaborator, Alexander Weiss, who is now recently in Lincoln Park Zoos. As said, today's talk will be on the comparison of ex situ and in situ personality and well-being of gorillas. And I used personality as a new tool to be implemented in the one plan approach. Daniel introduced the conservation toolkit yesterday, and I just want to summarize here quickly again what the one plan approach is all about. It's a comprehensive conservation strategy which integrates ex situ and in situ. Okay, wrong button. Ex situ and in situ population and techniques, and the emphasis is to conservation biodiversity, and this is done through collaborative initiative across several sectors. And zoos play a crucial role in this endeavor because zoos hold the animals, the ex situ population, and they do all kinds of activities such as translocations and breeding programs, and also to increase the welfare of the individuals. Yesterday we worked on the assessment forms, and this was on the level of the ex situ population. And I tried within my PhD actually to picturize the one welfare, the one plan approach, by this image here. So we have the ex situ population and the in situ population, and they are actually within the circle of life. And Paul introduced Vasa's animal welfare strategy earlier in his talk, and this is based on the tree of life, and this is the middle center of where I'm operating. I also used the yin-yang symbol, which represents the balance between the two populations. As we know, the one-plan approach aims for reciprocal exchanges between the two populations. Okay, next. So how do I apply personality within this one-plan approach? I look at the ex situ population and I measure the ex situ population's personality structure, and I do the same with the in situ population of gorillas. The one-plan approach usually operates on the ex situ level on the welfare approach. That's what we also did yesterday. And when we think about the wild populations, mostly we are talking about conservation approach. But this is actually interchangeable. I mean, we know that welfare is a continuum between captivity and wild. It's not strictly divided anymore. We know that also animals in the wild suffer in their welfare, and that's why I changed the approach to a one welfare plan, which I explain later on how I did it. But I wanted to cross the gap between the two pathways, which you have seen here, by using the personality and interlink both populations. So as said, I moved on from this one plan approach to one welfare plan by including Vasa's animal welfare strategy. It's based on Maslow's hierarchies of needs. That's what Paul showed earlier as well. And yesterday, as we were assessing the welfare strategies, we were working on the 5-domain model. And I combined those within the one welfare plan. And the first 4 needs are operated on the individual level. And I think we have to go beyond the individual level. We have to go on the population level to actually have the chance for the survival of the populations. So again, I try to picture this here. And as we all know, is that humans are central in this role to actually species survival. And Ido also mentioned yesterday that the philosophy here is that animal welfare is our welfare, and that's also what is pictured here, is that, you know, we have to go towards a welfare plan for all of us because we're depending on species survival. And yeah, this is just shown within this updated picture from the one plan approach towards the one welfare plan, that actually the humans is central on this approach. And this is again how it looks. That's what we want to reach. We actually want to reach a healthy and happy population, in situ and ex situ. Yesterday we talked about personality already, and I introduced the term personality, and here I will do this again. That personality is often used interchangeably between individual variability. You know, temperament is used as a term, behavioral types, syndromes, or coping styles. The definition of animal personality is based on the phenomenon that the individuals differ in their emotional, cognitive, and behavioral tendencies, and that the individual stays consistent over time and across diverse behavior conditions. But also, as shown yesterday, individuals underlie plasticity, and this is actually being shown in a study that we have state-dependent feedback loops which feed back to their own personality. So personality is actually a combination out of genetics, epigenetics, and environmental influences. And what I will try to do is, within this talk, yesterday we were operating on this level, on the proximate level, on the welfare level of the individuals in the zoo. And today I want to take you on this level, on the ultimate level, because we can use personality also as it predicts the evolution of populations, the survival of the groups, and general group dynamics and longer-term stabilities. And as said, I'm comparing the in situ and the ex situ personality structure of the gorillas, also within the genus of the gorillas, and compare it to earlier personality studies done on mountain gorillas. So as said yesterday, we operated on the individual level, on the proximate level, and so we know that personality predicts several outcomes, like well-being, conservation, health, longevity, or social relationships. You know, we said yesterday that we have to find matching partners when we want to introduce new individuals into a group, or for breeding. We know that some extroverts live longer. We know that personality predicts health outcomes and so on, and also conservation outcomes, as said. So here's the genus of the gorillas. We have the eastern gorillas and the western gorillas. They are divided in the wild within 1,000 kilometers. They are 1.2 to 1.3 million years ago is where they diverged. And genetically, they are as dispersed as chimpanzees to bonobos. Yeah? And they live in very different social ecology. And if you think about the mountain gorillas, this is the species I'm comparing the western lowland gorillas with. The mountain gorillas, they live high up in the mountains. They have no seasonality with their food. They have to 40% multi-male groups, up to 9 males in their groups. Whereas the western lowland gorillas have the harems groups. They are up to 95%. They face seasonality, and they have a whole different social and ecology which they have to face. And so for me, it was very interesting. Do I now expect that they have a very similar personality structure? What do you think? Or is it because of the social ecology that they are very different to each other? I mean, just keep this in mind when I show you the result. Maybe we can use this when we interpret the results. I've been lucky enough to have wonderful collaborators from 5 field sites, from Mongalbe, Baihoko, Mondika, Mabeli Bai, and Bukola Bodudu. And I had 25 people in the field who helped me out with rating the gorillas. I show you in the next slide what kind of tool was used. I used actually the same tool as it's been used for the mountain gorillas to keep methodological comparativity. Okay, here's the 5 field sites I had for the in situ population, 499 ratings done by 25 raters on a total of 198 in situ western lowland gorillas. And I was lucky enough to have data also from 30 zoos on 203 gorillas done by 90 raters. And I'm really thankful for everybody who helped me conducting this study. And we had 671 ratings, and this was earlier published. This is the data on the mountain gorillas by Winnie Eckert. She had 116 mountain gorillas, and you see all the data came from one field site. They had 116 gorillas and 556 ratings, and the population of the zoo with the 203 gorillas resembles about 1/4 of the total of the captive population. Winnie Eckert, she analyzed the personality structure, as said earlier, and she found 4 personality factors. It was dominance, openness, sociability, and proto-agreeableness. I used the same tool as said earlier, just to be able to compare in the best possible ways. It's been based on gorillas' personality questionnaires. The rater had to fill out a questionnaire based on 54 traits on a 7-point scale. So each rater was asked to fill in the 54 traits on each of the individuals, and the questions were predefined. And for instance, there was one question about curiosity, and then the rater had to fill in how he thinks the gorilla is curious or not at all. So this is actually the results. I know it's super crowded and it's very difficult to understand. It's only that I want to show that the 54 traits are distributed. So I was running a factor analysis. Then you combine those traits into certain components or factors. And this is all the 54 traits, how they distributed. Yeah. And here they have been distributed in mountain gorillas, and this is the in situ population of the western lowland gorillas. And what I just want to mention here is that you can compare on the higher order domains or dimensions, that's the factors here, which we found, or you can also go on the individual level, but you can also group up certain traits in so-called lower order facets, yeah? And this is color-coded here. It's not so relevant for you now. I just wanted to show here that we found 4 factors in situ western lowland gorillas, 6 factors in the ex situ western lowland gorillas, and 4 factors in the Virunga Mountain was shown earlier. So what is the difference? This is now based on the lower order facets, just that's easier for you to understand how the factors actually has been loaded. So we found a neuroticism factor in western lowland gorillas, of the wild western lowland gorillas, which has not been resembled in the mountain gorillas. And if you think about how different the social ecology is of the gorillas, then we also understand that the life is so much harder for being a western lowland gorillas, as they have to travel far distances. You know, when you have a harem and the leader dies, then the whole group disperses. They have to find food. They are based on seasonalities. Climate change has a huge impact on them. Whereas the mountain gorillas, they sit relatively safely, protected also within the mountains. Food is always available. There are several males in the group. If one male is dying, then the group can still coexist. And we have a huge dispersal pattern. 100% of the female and males in the western lowland gorillas in the wild. So what we also found is that we had a sociability factor, which was distributed in 3 factors in captivity, and we will shortly I will explain why this might have emerged. Then we had a dominance factor, which was represented in all 3. We had no distinct conscientiousness factor, and so we didn't found neuroticism in Virunga mountain gorillas. We had 1 factor only on the sociability, and we found no distinct conscientiousness in both of the wild forms. And I think this conscientiousness factor is an artifact of captivity, because we have we stimulate a lot, we offer a lot of environmental enrichment, we do a lot of cognitive testings on them, and that's how they adapt. They maybe are more prone to look and take part on cognitive approaches. And in general, I think this is very nicely resembles the social ecology of the different gorilla subspecies. And I can't go into details, but I'm very happy to explain later on more about it. But what we can find, or what was shown, is that there was a contemporary evolutionary change, and this is a rapid change on the personality structure. And if you think back again on the earlier picture, that we want to keep actually ex situ, in situ populations similar, then we found a huge artifact on that. And so this contemporary evolutionary change is done by selective pressures on the heritable traits via relaxed natural, artificial, and sexual selections. And the impact of the personality on species survival is actually quite traumatic, and has an impact on the success of the One Welfare Plan. As said earlier, it impacts wildlife conservation programs, reintroduction or translocation programs, and long-term population management and well-being in captivity. I wrote some recommendations where we can actually apply personality within any species. You know, it's very easy. It's a questionnaire, can be filled in by any raters. You can even do it on the toilet if you know the individual at least a year long. So it's an easy tool to be applied, and but it has a wide range of impacts where we actually can apply it to. And again, please come to me and with further questions or collaborations. I'm very pleased to hear from you. And I want to thank again all the collaboration partners here, the 90 raters and the 25 raters in the field and the 90 raters from the zoos, and for Marie Marguette, who gave me behavioral data on 124 Mabeli gorillas to actually validate the personality structure. Because if you use a tool as a questionnaire, you need to have behaviors to actually validate the personality structure. I haven't mentioned any methodology or anything I used. I used inter-rater reliability tests, robustness tests, and so on. But yeah, please come if you have more questions on that. But I want to thank. And one of the collaboration partner was Jana Robeist, and she lost her life in Mabeli Bay, and I just want to keep her in special memory, and this is the last slide on her I want to show, and I'm very thankful that I had a great chance getting to know to her. And thank you for your attention, and yeah, I'm here for any questions.
Thanks a lot for this interesting talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, other questions?
Thanks very much. That was fascinating. Forgive me if this is a really stupid question. On your slide of descriptors, where you had the pluses and the minuses for the words that were being used, what? Oh, I've made you break the whole thing. Sorry.
No, keep going.
What do the minuses mean? Are they traits that are not grouped, and so do you leave them out?
No. So if you think about the first factor, it's a great question. Thank you for asking, because it's very confusing, and I know I couldn't go into the methods. But you see some traits here loaded positively, and they actually feed positively. The value of this trait of this individual feeds positively into the neuroticism factor. Yeah. So if you have a trait here like solitary, and you look at the sociability factors, so if then you track off the sociability, the value of the traits from this factor, and all the others are positively loaded because they're all actually pro-social.
Any other urgent question? Yeah. Yeah, one more. I think one more is okay.
Thank you, very nice for this interesting idea. I have a question to the questionnaires, because I'm always a little bit skeptical how validated they are. You already said that you validate them. So how does the personality of the rater affect the personality of the animal he's rating? So is there any data?
That's also very interesting, yeah. To be honest, I'm coming from the same pathway as you. I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm not a psychologist, even though I'm at the psychologist department. And I had big difficulties at the beginning, and I wasn't sure where this whole questionnaire is going to lead me to. I was very skeptical, but actually what we run is inter-rater reliability tests and robustness tests. And if a rater is not reliable, then he's not going to be included within the personality structure. And the same as the gorilla. If the gorilla is rated by multiple raters with different entries, then the gorilla isn't stable and will not be included. The same on the level of the domains. You do the robustness test, and you also do the robustness test on the level of the traits itself. As said, I had 203 gorillas for the Exitu, and more than 671, I think, entries. And then each trait is rated, each rater is tested for reliability, and that's how you end up with a very robust personality structure, which you can apply then. And at the end, if you calculate the outcome of each of the individual, I did this once, and I showed this to one of the gorilla specialists. It was actually the gorilla stat book keeper, and I just showed the numbers of each of the factors, and then I asked him, what do you think which individuals is going to be represented by this value, and then he could easily point them out. Okay. It was really fascinating. And as longer I'm studying the personality and also using this questionnaire, it gives me the fantastic chance to, to compare across. I did comparison also across, great apes and other species, and it's only a very limited analysis shown here, but it gave me the great chance by using the same tool to compare across the species. When we think about the individual level on the zoo, then maybe it would make sense maybe to adapt a personality questionnaire more on the artificial context the animals are in. Let's say I would include, when I would write a new personality questionnaire for in ex situ gorillas only, I would also include some traits which represent the human-animal interface. Yeah, how easy they go along with humans, or how human-friendly they are, and I would include those traits into the questionnaire, but this was not on this level. I just wanted to see whether the ex situ and the ex situ personality structure are similar, or is this an artifact we maybe get in captivity, that the personality doesn't resemble the wild form anymore? And what does it tell us then when we find different personality structures? Then we actually rethinking back to what the tool is of the one plan approach, that we want to reciprocal exchange individuals again back to the wild. We should keep them as, similar as possible. And so the wild should always be the blueprint for ex situ. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. A big applause.
Thank you.
Again. Yeah, thank you.